Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Creative Writing Podcast. My name is Megan, and I'm going to lead you through a couple of writing sessions today. Today's episode is all about describing places from the perspective of an intense emotion. Um, and as always, you'll need a pen and a piece of paper, or maybe the notes app on your phone, or a brand new Word document. And just if you're new here, the aim of this podcast is that you sit down as if you were in a classroom with a creative writing teacher standing at the front, and you follow the prompts. And at the end of about 40-ish minutes, you have a little bit of writing that you can develop into a different idea, or you have practiced one element of craft. So today is going to be quite a bit about physical description. And or perhaps just by doing the writing session, you inspire yourself to have a kind of tangential idea or a conceptual leap, and that can kick off a creative project for you. Um, I, like a lot of writers, quite enjoy going to writing classes, even though I'm far from being a beginner at this stage. It's sometimes quite nice to hand the reins over to somebody else and just to let them prompt your imagination, and then you can just run wild with that. So I do know that like some of the people that are my regular listeners are actually quite experienced writers who just like enjoy the playfulness of this not being kind of the main project. So if that's you, then you're very welcome as well. And if you are someone that never does creative writing and thinks, oh yeah, I have stories in my mind all the time, it would be fun to write those down, then welcome. You are also in the right place. We're going to kind of get you going on a regular writing practice, we hope. So what we do first is we always jump in with a warm-up exercise. I'm going to be quiet in between the prompts, and just a reminder that that is an invitation for you to be scribbling words down on the page. Um, Today's prompt is for you to imagine a room, and I'm going to ask you to make an inventory of everything in the room as if you were an auctioneer. So even the carpets, the light fittings. I'd like us to begin today with a very factual description, um, just of a room and all the things in it. And just a reminder that if you're a science fiction or fantasy writer, then obviously you're going to conjure a place that makes sense for the kind of worlds that you write. And if you're historical, then of course the same. And if you write in the contemporary world, in any of the countries that we all live in, then you can focus your writing on something more familiar. So, an inventory of everything in a room. And I'll talk again in about 2 minutes. and hopefully you've begun to get some words down. But if you're pausing or stuttering as we warm up, perhaps your evaluator finds something in this room that they don't immediately know what it is. So there's one particular object that they have to investigate, but will still keep their investigation factual. And now, in the last 30 seconds, we might find somewhere intentional to bring that little bit of writing to a close. Or perhaps your auctioneer has to list at least 10 more things. Or maybe your mind did one of those strange conceptual jumps and suddenly you have a lot of ideas in your mind. Feel free to, write them, scribble them down before we carry on. And if this auctioneer has exploded into life for you, then do press pause and you can rejoin us whenever you want. But if you're moving ahead with me, then we'll just move on to have a think about um, places, the places we create and conjure into being when we write them down, and how when we attempt to describe them neutrally, that's often when our prose can come out as flat and boring. So, what we want to try and avoid in our writing is a sense that the story itself has paused, that a neutral voice is stepping in to provide information about the physical space that the characters are in, and that once the information is over, the story will resume. What we want is for the description of the location and the introduction to it, or, the return to it, to really just feel embedded in the story. And it's surprising how often when you're reading, you come across a few sentences that just kind of don't land or feel like a suspension of the author or narrator's voice or the character's voice when they're entering into a new place. We also want to be aware of giving our readers enough information that they understand physically what's happening in that space. Like how literally how large are rooms, how many people can they hold. I think there's nothing worse than imagining a space and then later in the story something happens in that space that would be impossible, because then you as the reader have to completely reimagine kind of where you are and what you're doing. And it's also worth considering that anytime you describe something, someone else might have a very different version of it in their head. So I've recently written a novel that has a river running through a town, and in my head it's a very small river with a very tiny bridge. And then somebody who read it for me got really invested in which river it was, and in their mind it was like the Mersey or the Thames or the Mississippi, some enormous, the Danube, some enormous river carving through the countryside. And I was like, oh no, it's supposed to be, slightly larger than a stream. um just even that sense of like, what is the river and how does it interact with the story became something that I had to go back and edit to make really clear to the readers that my people in this town were not living on the edge of some enormous shipping channel. So what we want to maintain when we're describing a place is this sense of perspective. And for me, one of the things that comes along with perspective or gives us a good perspective is an emotion. So describing a place from the point of view of having a strong emotional reaction to it really tells us a lot about the character who stepped into that space. It tells us a lot about the plot and the story. It gives us a lot of opportunity to foreshadow what might happen in the space or create an expectation that we can then subvert later in a story. So we can use this first introduction as a space to set up a lot of what we might need later on. So now we're going to imagine a room. And if you want, it can be the room that you've just conjured during the warm-up exercise. And we're going to put a character in that room. That can be a character that's from a longer piece that you work with and you want to spend today with that character to explore their attitudes to things, or it can be a brand new person. We could say that Pietro is 17 or Georgie is 89. It's up to you. A name and an age, and today's writing through this person's attitude to place, I promise you, will tell us an awful lot about them. So we're going to begin describing this room from our character's point of view. And the way our character feels about this room is that it frightens them. They are coming from a perspective of feeling the emotion of fear. So this place could be dangerous or it could be spooky. There's a lot in fear that there's a lot of choices you can make within that umbrella. So you have a character stepping into a room and it makes them feel fear. And you can begin just with a physical description of that room so the reader has some, some idea of like the big brushstrokes of where everything is, what kind of room it is, what it's used for, what's in there, what the objects are, what the decoration is like. So I'm going to be quiet now for about 5 minutes. A character is describing a room that makes them feel fear. And now in this room that's full of fear, let's have something move unexpectedly. Maybe something simply falls off a shelf, but some kind of weird, unexpected movement. And now, because it's something that sets off all of our ancient fears about being prey rather than predators, we're going to add a creepy sound somewhere in your room or coming from outside your room. So we're exploring this space through the perspective of fear, and we're going to lean into the sense of sound and hearing to add either to the danger or the creepiness or whatever else is kicking off your character's sense that things are not quite right here at all. And now, if you're writing very fluently and things are flowing from you, I invite you to press pause and keep going for a few minutes until the fear, until you've mined the seam of that enough. If you're following along with me, I invite you to finish the sentence that you're on, pause, going to just sit back from that piece of writing for a moment. We're going to rewind this scene back to the beginning. Your character is going to come into this same room again. This time, the emotion that they are experiencing when they enter the room is the relief of coming home, of coming back to a place that's familiar. So whether or not they've really been here before, or whether it just is reminiscent and gives them that emotion of kind of nostalgia, that's up to you. It might, of course, be their home. So we're going to pause, we're going to lean back, we're going to think about this character, we're going to bring them back to the door, they're going to step in again. I'd like a physical description of the room again, but now all of the emotion is just comfort, homeliness, warmth, emotional safety, relief. Finally, they've somewhere that feels like home. And once again, in this room, something moves unexpectedly. But this time, of course, your character can see the explanation. It doesn't disrupt their sense of kind of comfort and relief, this unexpected movement. And again, let's lean into the sense of sound. We'll have a sound either inside or just outside your room that disrupts what your character is thinking about as they arrive in this place. But once again, it's not a sound that disturbs them overmuch. Perhaps it's familiar or nostalgic, or maybe even a little bit intriguing, but it doesn't alter their sense of absolute safety. Now, if you're enjoying this writing about this sense of homeliness and comfort, do hit pause and carry on with that. Let this develop any way it wants to. If you're carrying on with me, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to stop, bring it to a close, full stop. We're going to lean back from our paper, lift our eyes from the page, refresh our brain a little bit. We're going to rewind back to the back of that scene for one final prompt of today, which is I'm going to invite you to write this out a third time with any other strong emotion that you think would be fascinating to explore. And if none jump into your mind, I suggest something like jealousy. That's a really interesting one. Disgust, perhaps pity, or maybe it's a little bit more complicated, this feeling, but the feeling of being trapped and needing to get out, which isn't always about not liking our surroundings. We could accept that our surroundings are lovely, but still just feel the need to kind of move and escape and be somewhere else. So pick another emotion and let's explore this place again from the perspective of that third emotion. And we'll try and make it quite a strong reaction to the space. And now I've hardly given you any time at all with this final third emotion. So do give yourself the time here just to hit pause and spend a few more minutes with it. Can go in any direction that you choose. But I'm going to move on to inviting you to draw your writing to a close and to reflect on what has happened on the page in the last 40 minutes or so. With a writing session like this, your reflection can actually be a little more technical than with some of the other writing sessions. So it might be worth reading back in detail and having a look at the language that went down on the page that helped you convey the emotion or where your mind went to convey that emotion. You might have done that quite consciously, think it's more likely with a lot of writers that it's more unconscious. Did one of the emotions express itself in short or longer sentences than the other one? Obviously, you might have had a long, punctuationless build up of terror. Did one of the emotions introduce speaking with lots of figurative language? Did it express itself through a lot of simile and metaphor? Or did one insist on adjectives and another is very simple? Have a read back through your writing and actually assess it for how you attempted to convey a strong emotional reaction for the room. And obviously, the point of doing that in this writing session is that if you're writing a longer piece and you encounter a passage where your character has to experience fear, then as well as doing it subconsciously, like instinctively in your writing, you can look back and think, oh, I have a few tools for that. And I know how, not just how the character's going to feel, but how the language is going to convey how the character feels. That's like a step forwards in having control of your material. Another interesting way to reflect in a session like this is to read what you wrote about home and imagine that as the setup that you're going to subvert later, and then read what you wrote about the emotion of fear and see, would that be a great subversion if I'd set this up as a familiar place? Would it be extra horrible for the reader if the character arrived back here later? So I asked you to write fear first and comfort, homeliness second, but you could switch. What would happen if you switch those around? Would you heighten that emotion having set it up previously? As always, I'd invite you to read back and have a look at the words on the page and see if there's anything that just really amuses you or makes your heart flutter with what you've written today. I think that's one of the nicest things as a writer, is that we have this ability just to read back over our own work and accept that a particular turn of phrase, we've really nailed it. We can say to ourselves, yeah, that element of it feels really good. And that's why, I do these sessions at the kind of length I do, because sometimes if we write for 5 minutes, it's easy to look back and not enjoy what we've managed to get done on the page. And with a little bit of a longer time, usually there's something there that's worth feeling very proud of. And what I invite people to do is actually to draw around that or put a star in the margin or highlight it. And the idea is that when you're going back through your notebook, you have a set of phrases there that can inspire you to jump into the next piece of writing that you want to do. If you were working with a character that you know really well today, then it'd be interesting to reflect on what home meant to them. When you've built up a character, they might have had quite a complex reaction to that prompt of feeling comfortable in a place. I think as writers, to make things exciting for our readers, we're obviously trying to push our characters out of their comfort zone. But sometimes, especially when we've been with them for a while, it can be interesting to know what is their comfort zone? What would a somewhere homely and comfortable feel like for them? Or equally, if you have met a new character today, did the scenes you wrote tell you, or the descriptions, sorry, tell you something about what they're really terrified of? Could that be an interesting way into a longer, more sophisticated piece of writing than there's time for here, about this character and what makes them fearful, or about this character and what makes them experience a sense of home? That's it for today. If you enjoyed this session, then you might also like the idea of meeting a new place from 2 or 3 weeks ago. I will add a link to that episode in the description in case you want to have another cheeky episode before I get around to it next week. And apart from that, yeah, there's quite a lot of episodes there now. So if you want any more, then do scroll back through and see if anything else catches your eye. And I will be with you again soon.